Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Alexis Dillard was last seen leaving Johnny's Tavern, situated on the 400 block of North 2nd Street in North Lawrence, Kansas, around 12:40 a.m. on December 11, 1992. At the time of his disappearance, Dillard was a senior at the University of Kansas, majoring in business. He had been out that evening with his fraternity brothers from Phi Gamma Delta, celebrating the approaching end of the fall semester. He has not been seen or heard from since that night. One theory surrounding Dillard's disappearance is that he may have drowned. His friends reported that he had swum across the Kansas River on previous occasions, leading some to speculate that he might have attempted to do so again after leaving the bar. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this or any other hypothesis. Authorities did discover a footprint in the mud along the riverbank that resembled Dillard's shoe, but the footprint was facing away from the water. Some individuals claim to have seen Dillard hitchhiking on the night he disappeared, but these sightings have not been verified. Dillard's family described him as an intelligent, responsible, and sensible young man, someone who would not depart without informing anyone of his plans. He was enrolled in the ROTC program and was expected to graduate from the university in the spring of 1993. When he was not at school, he resided in Wichita, Kansas. His case remains unsolved. On the evening of Thursday, December 10, 1992, Alexis Dillard spent time with his fraternity brothers. The 22-year-old University of Kansas senior, a business major, visited several bars with his friends. His last known location that night was Johnny's Tavern in Lawrence, Kansas. His friends lost track of him at approximately 12:30 a.m. on Friday, and they were unable to locate him when they were ready to leave. They searched the bar in the immediate vicinity, but Alexis had vanished. He has not been seen since. Alexis had left his own vehicle at an earlier bar and obtained a ride to Johnny's Tavern with one of his friends. His car remained where he had parked it earlier in the evening, indicating that he never returned to it. Given that the temperature was well below freezing, Alexis's friends were deeply concerned for his well-being. They contacted the Lawrence Police Department and reported Alexis as missing. Law enforcement officers, along with many of Alexis's friends and his parents, conducted an extensive search for the missing student over the weekend, but they found no clues to indicate his whereabouts. Johnny's Tavern was situated less than a block from the Kansas River, leading to initial concerns that Alexis might have entered the water. Deputies from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and officers from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks participated in the search, thoroughly examining the riverbanks, but they found no evidence suggesting that Alexis had drowned. Alan Loden, one of Alexis's roommates, informed detectives that Alexis was a strong swimmer who had swum across the Kansas River on at least 2 occasions in the past, though only during the summer months. Loden described Alexis as a mature and highly responsible individual, and he did not believe that Alexis would have attempted to enter the water on a frigid December night. Andy Martin, one of Alexis's friends who assisted in the search efforts, told reporters that Alexis was extremely intelligent and he had a lot of common sense. He'd been in ROTC and he knows about hypothermia. Alexis's mother, Felicie Dillard, also believed that her son would not have tried to swim across the river in December. She stated, Alexis had swum the river before, but it had been in the summer and it had been after seasons of drought. I mean, Alexis was an adventurous person, but he wasn't foolish or foolhardy. Those who knew Alexis well expressed their hope that he would not be found in the river. Alan Loden commented, if he's in the river, I don't think he's going to be okay, and we want to find him okay. He could have been picked up by someone, abducted. He could be hurt somewhere. The possibilities are endless. As the weekend drew to a close, investigators acknowledged their increasing concern regarding Alexis's disappearance. Lawrence Police SGT Mac Pryor told reporters, "He was drinking, of course, so we don't know how intoxicated he might have been. It's unusual when someone is missing and there has been no contact for 3 days. So yes, we are concerned." By Sunday night, more than 2,000 missing person flyers have been distributed throughout Lawrence and the neighboring city of Eudora. Alexis's friends had also begun raising money to offer a cash reward for any information that might lead to finding him. Despite these efforts, only a few tips came in with potential sightings, and none of these could be confirmed. SGT Pryor acknowledged the lack of substantial information, stating, "The information we have is sketchy at best, and that's all we have." Alexis was a well-liked and respected student at Kansas University. He was an active member of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity and also worked at the student union on campus. He had been raised in Wichita, Kansas, and was a 1988 graduate of Wichita East High School, where he had served as the president of his senior class. Alexis consistently achieved excellent grades throughout high school and was a member of the varsity soccer team. He had earned several scholarships to help fund his education at Kansas University, and he also worked part-time as an accountant to cover his remaining expenses. He was the last person anyone expected to disappear. In the days immediately following Alexis's disappearance, detectives interviewed more than 50 individuals, but they were unable to uncover any solid leads regarding his whereabouts. Heavy rain hampered the physical search efforts on Monday, adding to the frustration of his friends. Doug Draper, one of Alexis's roommates, expressed the prevailing sentiment when he told reporters, "We're trying to remain optimistic. There's just absolutely no clues. There's just no proof he's in the water. There's no proof he walked away." Lawrence Police SGT Mark Warren stated that it was unlikely that Alexis would have voluntarily entered the river after leaving the bar. He emphasized the dangers of the river, saying, "Common sense dictates that you don't swim in that river. That river is not to be messed with. There are currents above and below the dam that are unexplainable." After speaking with Alexis's relatives and friends, detectives concluded that he would not have disappeared of his own accord. They noted that it would be completely out of character for Alexis to leave the area without informing someone of his intentions. Doug Draper emphasized this point, stating he was a very good student and involved in leadership of the fraternity and student groups on campus. He's never taken a spontaneous trip without calling. On Tuesday, December 15th, 1992, members of the Kansas National Guard joined the search for Alexis. They used a helicopter to conduct aerial scans of the banks of the Kansas River and the area surrounding Johnny's Tavern. But these efforts yielded no clues to Alexis's whereabouts. As news of Alexis's disappearance spread, investigators received several tips from members of the public who believed they had seen the young man after he left the bar in the early hours of Friday morning. At least 2 witnesses reported seeing someone matching Alexis's description walking across the Kansas River Bridge shortly before 1 a.m. Detectives theorized that Alexis might have been attempting to return to the bar where he had left his car. If this was the case, he never reached his destination. Friends suggested that it was also possible that Alexis had decided to walk back to campus. They noted that it was not uncommon for some members of their group to walk back if they did not want to wait for a ride. Doug Draper commented on the walkability of Lawrence, saying, "Lawrence is such a small town. It's never been a problem. I have done that myself from many bars." Another witness told detectives that he had picked up a hitchhiker who he believed could have been Alexis. The witness stated that he had picked up the hitchhiker in Lawrence and dropped him off west of Topeka. SGT Warren provided details of this lead, saying, "Through the course of the conversation with the motorist, this person sounded like he wanted to go to Colorado. It could be our missing person, but that can't be confirmed." These possible sightings raised the hopes of Alexis's friends, who mentioned that they had planned to take a skiing trip to Colorado during their upcoming winter break. However, they found it difficult to believe that Alexis would have tried to travel there on his own, and they emphasized that hitchhiking would have been completely out of character for the responsible young man. Through the news media, they issued a plea to Alexis, urging him to contact someone and let them know that he was safe if he was able to reach a phone. A week after Alexis was last seen, his fate remained unknown. Multiple helicopter searches of the Kansas River had failed to produce any clues, and investigators acknowledged that they were perplexed by the missing student's disappearance. Major Jay Moser, the public affairs officer for the Kansas National Guard, commented on the lack of findings, stating, "We didn't find anything, which is good because maybe this person could be alive somewhere." SGD Warren told reporters that investigators were frustrated by the lack of progress in the case, but they were not ready to abandon their efforts. He stated, "We'll follow leads as they come in. There is still no indication of any type of foul play. What we have is a missing person. There is no indication to make anything more of it than that." Alexis's friends continued to hold on to hope, but the absence of any substantial leads in the case caused them considerable worry. Doug Draper expressed this frustration, saying, "The hardest thing to deal with is the lack of closure on the whole issue. There's no clues. There's nothing." As the holiday season approached, the campus of Kansas University became quiet. Students departed to spend winter break with their families, and the search for Alexis lost momentum. Investigators continued to pursue the few tips they had received, but it gradually became apparent that the case was at risk of going cold. By the time students returned for the spring semester, Alexis's disappearance was no longer at the forefront of their minds. Months passed without any significant developments in the case. Eventually, another December arrived, marking a full year since Alexis had been missing. Lawrence Police Detective Kevin Harmon acknowledged that investigators still had no idea what had happened to the missing student. He described the investigation as extremely frustrating, stating, "This has been a very frustrating case for our law enforcement agency. There have been people who have been gone for long periods of time, but we normally come up with something. There was never any concrete information that Alexis went into the river. In fact, some of the evidence we have indicates that he might have walked across the bridge." Despite a year of investigation, they have been unable to trace his movements beyond that point. Alexis's mother, Felicie Dillard, conveyed the family's diminished hopes, telling reporters, "We don't expect good news. Good news would be a miracle." To commemorate the first anniversary of their son's disappearance, his parents established an endowed stipend fund at Kansas University. This was intended as a way to ensure that his name and memory would endure at the university he had cherished. Despite the passage of time and a lack of answers, Felicie Dillard expressed a measure of acceptance, telling reporters, "We know he's not coming back. We've told ourselves that we're going to get on to the legacy and talking about who Alexis was." Alexis would be the first person to say, "Okay, I'm gone. I'm not coming back, folks. Get on with your lives." Alexis Dillard was 22 years old when he disappeared from Lawrence, Kansas, in December 1992. He was a popular student at Kansas University, where he was a member of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. Alexis had brown hair and brown eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 155 pounds as of May 2025. His case remains unsolved. The disappearance of Joan Butler in June 1989 remains a case marked by unanswered questions and linked to the crimes of a convicted murderer. Joan Butler was last seen in the early morning hours of June 18, 1989, while out with friends in Overland Park, Kansas. Authorities determined she returned to her apartment, where she lived alone, as the clothes she wore that evening were found there. Evidence at Butler's apartment suggested a disturbance. Investigators found a half-eaten slice of toast, a half-smoked cigarette, and a single contact lens. Butler was missing, as was her rental car, a red or maroon Chevrolet Corsica, and approximately $900 from her bank account. Neighbors reported hearing a loud thud in the vicinity of her apartment at approximately 4:30 a.m. on June 18th. Butler's rental car was discovered on June 25th, parked at an apartment complex in Lenexa, Kansas. As law enforcement officers arrived at the location, a man approached the Corsica and opened the trunk. Upon noticing the approaching officers, he closed the trunk and fled the scene. The last documented trace of Joan Butler is a photograph taken by an ATM security camera on the night of June 26th. The image shows her wearing oversized sunglasses and a visible bruise on her forehead. She has not been seen or heard from since. Richard Grissom Jr. was implicated in Butler's disappearance. His fingerprints were found inside Butler's car, along with his wallet, checkbook, and driver's license. A witness reported seeing Grissom driving the rental car on June 20th. Inside the car's glove compartment, authorities found air pistol pellets and CO2 cartridges. A drop of Butler's blood was discovered in the trunk. The underside of the Corsica had dust and gravel adhered to it, and the vehicle had scratches consistent with contact with branches and brush. Grissom was apprehended in Texas on July 7, 1989. In 1990, he was convicted of murdering Butler and two other women, Teresa Brown and Christine Rush, roommates who disappeared from Lenexa on June 26. Grissom was convicted of 8 additional charges related to the murders. He received 4 life sentences and will not be eligible for parole until 2095. He is also a suspect in at least 2 other homicides, though he has not been charged in those cases. Grissom had a history of violent crime, committing his first murder at the age of 16. Joan Butler was a graduate of the University of Kansas and was described as an ambitious young woman. Despite extensive searches, the remains of Joan Butler, Teresa Brown, and Christine Rush have never been found. The cases are documented in Dan Mitrione's book, Suddenly Gone: The Kansas Murders of Serial Killer Richard Grissom. Megan Foglesong was last seen in Alden, Kansas, in late November or early December 2015. Originally from Oneida, Illinois, she had moved to Alden prior to her disappearance. Her last activity on her Facebook account was on November 30th, and she has not been heard from since. Megan Foglesong's early life was marked by a move from Kansas to Illinois at a young age. She grew up with her father and stepmother, Dawn, in Oneida, a small town in Knox County, Illinois. She attended Rova High School, where she was known for her love of softball, particularly her skill as a pitcher. Those who knew her during this time remember her as a happy, fun-loving, and spontaneous person. This spontaneity, while a part of her charm, would later contribute to the initial challenges in investigating her disappearance. After graduating high school in 2012, Foglesong sought to reconnect with her biological mother, Pam Lewis, who still resided in central Kansas. This decision led her to relocate to Alden, Kansas, a small town in Rice County with a very small population. It was in Alden that she became acquainted with David L. Madden. David Madden, a former Marine, was significantly older than Megan and had a prior relationship with her mother. Despite these factors, Megan and Madden began a romantic relationship. This relationship raised concerns among Megan's friends in both Kansas and Illinois, who disapproved of the age difference in Madden's past. Madden's history included convictions for battery. Court records also detailed an incident in North Carolina in 2003 while he was stationed at Camp Lejeune. Madden and 2 other Marines had been out drinking. His companions later murdered a man. Madden was arrested but released after providing his version of events. However, rumors in Alden suggested that Madden had boasted about getting away with murder, a detail that may have been shared with Megan. In 2014, Megan was living with Madden in Alden. Friends reported that she began using methamphetamine during this time. She briefly worked at a local cafe, but left abruptly. The circumstances surrounding her departure suggested that Madden was exerting a controlling influence over her life. The relationship between Megan and Madden was marked by volatility. In late 2014, Megan attempted to leave him. A 911 call reported that Madden had taken Megan against her will. Witnesses described him putting her in a straitjacket at gunpoint at his home in Alden. When police located the couple, Megan denied that anything was wrong. Concerned for her safety, Megan's stepmother, Dawn, made multiple requests for welfare checks at Madden's home. Documents indicate numerous visits by law enforcement to Madden's residence. Following the 911 call, Megan returned to Illinois and stayed with her father and stepmother for approximately 6 months. She sent a message to the 911 caller, expressing gratitude for their concern and support. However, on November 25, 2015, the day before Thanksgiving, Madden was released from jail after being held for driving with a suspended license. Despite expressing her intention to stay away from him, Megan returned to Alden and to Madden. Less than a week later, David Madden reported to the police that Megan had stolen from him and left after an argument. Days passed with no contact from Megan with her friends or family. Due to her spontaneous nature and lack of a regular work schedule, her absence did not immediately raise alarm. However, when she missed Christmas and her birthday, her family in Illinois became worried. Dawn Foglesong accessed Megan's Facebook page and found a message indicating that Megan was back in Alden and at Madden's house. This was her last online activity on November 30th, 2015. Dawn began contacting Megan's friends for information. One friend mentioned a rumor in Alden that Madden had harmed Megan. David Madden did not respond to Dawn's inquiries. Dawn traveled to Alden. She reported difficulty in getting the police to file a missing person report, as Megan was an adult. Finally, in February 2016, the report was filed. Two pieces of information surfaced. A friend had received a text message from Megan's phone on December 7th, stating, "I'm okay." The friend was unsure if Megan had sent the message. Another person reported seeing Megan at a liquor store around Thanksgiving. Megan's cell phone records could not be obtained because it was a prepaid phone. In early 2016, the Rice County Sheriff's Department indicated that foul play was suspected in Megan's disappearance. The case was turned over to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. David Madden was named a person of interest, but his home was not searched at that time. In February 2017, Madden led law enforcement on a high-speed chase through Rice and Barton counties. He was apprehended and charged with assault of a law enforcement officer, driving with a suspended license, and felony fleeing and eluding. Following this incident, a KBI agent investigating Megan's disappearance received information that Madden was involved with explosives. A search warrant was executed on his home in Alden, and his father's home in Raymond was also searched. The searches revealed 2 crates containing 24 metal pipe bombs, live military ordnance projectiles, smokeless powder, a railroad torpedo, an AK-47 machine gun, and a .45 caliber pistol. Madden admitted to making and detonating pipe bombs since childhood. He claimed to have found the machine gun in Iraq while serving in the Marines. He was later indicted on unlawful possession of a firearm. The searches did not yield any information related to Megan's disappearance. In April 2019, while out of prison, Madden was involved in a shooting incident during a traffic stop in Sterling, Kansas. He shot a county undersheriff and had a woman and child in the car with him. After the shooting, he drove to his residence, retrieved more guns and ammunition, and then drove to his father's home in Raymond, Kansas, where he fatally shot his father. When law enforcement arrived at his father's house, Madden shot the sheriff and engaged in a standoff with other officers. After a 6-hour standoff, authorities stormed the residence and found Madden dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The woman in the car during the traffic stop, Erin Baker, was later arrested and charged with endangering a child and obstructing the investigation. She pleaded no contest and was sentenced to jail. Baker stated that Madden had told her that Megan was flighty and would disappear for days or weeks at a time. He claimed that the last time he saw her, they had argued, someone picked her up, and he hadn't seen or heard from her since. Following Madden's death, the KBI declared him a suspect in Megan's disappearance. Megan Foglesong's disappearance remains unsolved. The disappearance of Catherine Clampett is closely linked to the crimes of convicted murderer John Edward Robinson Sr. in January 1987. Catherine Clampett moved to Kansas to live with her brother's family. She had previously resided in Wichita Falls, Texas, with her son. Clampett had struggled with drug and alcohol issues in the early to mid-1980s, and her brother agreed to help her. Clampett left her son in her parents' custody in Texas, while she sought employment in Kansas. Shortly after her arrival, Clampett responded to an advertisement for a company called Equi2, a management consulting firm located in Overland Park, Kansas. Her brother found the wording of the ad, which mentioned extensive travel and a new wardrobe, to be unusual. Clampett was hired by the company's owner, John Edward Robinson Sr., due to the nature of her position. Clampett often stayed at local hotels for several nights at a time. Her brother became concerned when she did not return home after leaving on June 15, 1987. He reported that he visited Robinson at the Equi 2 offices, and Robinson acknowledged that he was aware of the search for Clampett. Catherine Clampett has never been heard from again. Clampett's case was reopened in 2000 after Robinson, who had an extensive criminal history, was charged with murdering several women in the Kansas area. 5 bodies were discovered in barrels at a storage facility rented by Robinson. His trial began in 2000, and he became the primary suspect in Clampett's disappearance. Robinson is also believed to be connected to the disappearances of Paula Godfrey and Lisa Stasi, 2 young women who were associated with him in Overland Park in 1984 and 1985 and vanished without a trace. Lisa Stasi has never been found, and Robinson was charged with her murder. Stasi's daughter, Tiffany, was allegedly abducted by Robinson and placed with his brother's family in an illegal adoption shortly after Stasi, and the infant disappeared in 1985. DNA testing confirmed Tiffany's identity in 2000. Robinson was convicted of Lisa Stasi's murder and the murders of 2 other women in Kansas in late October 2002. A jury recommended that he receive the death penalty for the murders of the 2 women and a life sentence for the murder of Lisa Stasi. The remains of Catherine Clampett have never been located. In the heart of Kansas, where suburban life unfolds with a sense of everyday tranquility, a chilling mystery casts a long shadow. This is the story of Tabitha Brewer and Nicholas Travis, a young couple whose bright future was abruptly extinguished, leaving behind a void that continues to haunt their loved ones. 14-year-old Tabitha Brewer was a typical teenager, navigating the challenges of adolescence, cherishing friendships, and dreaming about the possibilities that lay ahead. But her life took a dramatic turn during her freshman year at Shawnee Mission South High School. A car accident, the details of which remain a painful memory for her family, left Tabitha with severe injuries, a fractured skull, and lasting scars that serve as a constant reminder of that fateful day. The accident forced Tabitha to put her studies on hold. Determined to catch up with her peers, she transferred to an alternative high school. It was there that she found a supportive and loving presence in her boyfriend, Nicholas Travis. By 1998, Tabitha and Nick had been together for over a year. Their connection was more than just a teenage romance. It was a deep bond that those around them recognized as something truly special. They were each other's pillars of strength, offering unwavering support and encouragement. The assistant principal at their school observed that they were, in a way, 2 halves of a whole, each stronger and better when they were together. Both Nick and Tabitha excelled in their studies and seemed to genuinely enjoy their classes. However, they eventually made the decision to leave school and enter the workforce. Nick found employment at a local sandwich shop, while Tabitha secured a position as a secretary at a mortgage company, working alongside her stepmother, Donna. Though young, Tabitha and Nick had begun to lay the foundation for their future. They spoke of marriage, buying a home, and starting a family. They even had a name picked out for their future daughter, Destiny. Before moving in with Tabitha's father and stepmother, the couple had lived with her mother, Brenda. Brenda had grown fond of Nick, who was always willing to lend a hand around the house, whether it was painting walls or tending to the water garden. For Christmas, he had even gifted her a bottle of perfume, a thoughtful gesture that mirrored Tabitha's own kindness. But this very kindness, this willingness to help, may have played a role in the tragic events that unfolded on the night of April 27, 1998. That evening, Tabitha and Nick were at their apartment when Nick mentioned that he needed to run an errand. Having attended the same school, shared the same circle of friends, and lived in the same home, Tabitha and Nick rarely spent time apart. Tabitha, perhaps feeling a sense of unease or simply wanting to be with Nick, insisted on accompanying him. Earlier that evening, a friend from their high school, Chad Haviland had paged Nick to see if he could come over. Nick told Chad that he could stop by, but that they were about to head out. Chad arrived in his van and spoke with Nick and another friend. Nick didn't disclose the nature of the errand, only mentioning that it would take a couple of hours. He told them that he was going to be picked up by another classmate, an 18-year-old named Brandon Howell. A few minutes later, Howell arrived. Nick went inside to get Tabitha, and shortly before midnight, the three of them drove off. It was the last time anyone saw Tabitha and Nick alive. When the young couple failed to return home, their families were consumed with worry. Initially, authorities considered the possibility that Tabitha and Nick had run away together, perhaps to elope. However, this theory quickly unraveled. Neither of them had used their bank accounts, nor had they contacted any friends or family members. They hadn't packed any belongings, and they hadn't left a note explaining their absence. Nick's car remained parked in the driveway, in perfect working condition and with a full tank of gas. Tabitha and Nick's families sprang into action. They printed missing person posters and distributed them throughout the neighborhood. Reports of sightings came in, with people claiming to have seen the teenagers in Johnson County. However, these sightings could not be verified. The police investigation initially yielded few concrete leads. But a few days later, on April 30th, a witness reported seeing a man throwing something into a trash bin behind a laundromat. The owner of the laundromat, Charles Carr, checked the bin and made a disturbing discovery: a charred, gasoline-soaked purse. Inside, he found Tabitha's belongings, her and Nick's identification cards, Nick's checkbook, photos of Tabitha with her nieces and nephews, and some of her jewelry. For Tabitha's family, the discovery was devastating. Her mother, Brenda, knew that something was terribly wrong. She always wore her jewelry, Brenda said. I can't think of any reason her jewelry would be in her purse unless someone took her jewelry off so her body would be harder to identify. A week after Tabitha's purse was found, the Kansas City Star reported that police were struggling to find witnesses who had seen the young couple on the night they disappeared. As the last person known to have seen Tabitha and Nick, Brandon Howell became a central figure in the investigation. Howell told authorities that he had dropped the couple off at a nearby convenience store and hadn't heard from them since. However, statements from friends of Tabitha and Nick revealed that Howell had given conflicting accounts of their destination. A search of Howell's car revealed what appeared to be shoe scuff marks on the inside of the trunk lid. When questioned by detectives, Howell invoked his right to remain silent and refused to answer any further questions without his lawyer present. With no concrete evidence of a crime and Howell's lawyer out of town, the police were forced to wait. In the meantime, they interviewed everyone they could find and meticulously reviewed their reports, hoping to uncover a crucial clue. Several more sightings were reported, including one from a man who claimed that Tabitha and Nick could be found in a field in Kansas City, hungry, dirty, but alive. The man warned the police to send a large number of officers to the location. However, after an extensive search, it became clear that the call was a cruel hoax. While Nick and Tabitha's families continued their desperate search, giving interviews, attending marches, and distributing flyers and bumper stickers, the police investigation hit a dead end. Then, on August 14th, 1998, the case took a tragic turn. Just 4 doors down from where Tabitha's purse had been found, there was a duplex that had been vacant for the previous 5 years. The owner was in the process of selling it to Willa Bird, who planned to move into the home with her mother. Willa had begun renovating the property, a process that had been ongoing for a year, but she decided to accelerate her efforts so that they could move in by the end of August 1998. Willa hired a construction worker to pour concrete along the back of the duplex to prevent water from flooding the basement and to build a patio over the top. As the worker dug about 6 inches into the ground, he made a gruesome discovery: a shoe concealed beneath the soil. When he pulled the shoe out, he realized, to his horror, that there was a human foot inside. The news spread quickly, and Tabitha's father and stepmother rushed to the scene, waiting anxiously outside the yellow crime scene tape for news about whose body had been found. They sat in their pickup truck all night and for most of the next day, with neighbors stopping by to offer food, drinks, and words of comfort. On Tuesday, August 18th, for days after the body was found, police announced that they had made an identification. The remains were those of Nick Travis. The discovery stirred up a complex mix of emotions for Tabitha's family. While it wasn't Tabitha's body, the hope of finding her alive was dealt a severe blow. Her father, Tom, told the Kansas City Star, "Knowing Nick and knowing Tabitha, and knowing how close they are, I feel that whatever happened to Nick happened to her." Police intensified their search of the scene. They dug up the top 10 inches of soil from the yard, sifting through it for any clues. They brought in cadaver dogs, hoping they might find fresh evidence. But the dogs found nothing. After completing the excavation, they searched the rest of the duplex, spraying luminol to look for any traces of blood or other evidence that might suggest Nick had been killed inside the home. Testing later revealed that blood spatters and smears found in the duplex matched Nick's DNA. An autopsy confirmed that he had died from a blow to the head. The case was now officially a homicide investigation, and investigators soon found a connection between the duplex and Brandon Howell. The contractor working on the home was a friend of the new owner, Willibird. That friend was Rami Howell, Brandon Howell's father. In May 1997, long before Tabitha and Nick disappeared, Rami Howell had requested a permit to work on the house, repairing the roof and raising the ceiling. Since then, Rami and various family members had been working on the house, preparing it for Willa and her mother to move in. Brandon had worked on construction jobs with his father in the past, although it was unclear if he had ever worked at the duplex. Willa stated that it was possible he had worked there, though she hadn't seen him. By August 19th, police announced that they had a very strong focus in the investigation into Nick Travis's death. They had contacted Howell's lawyers to request that he come to police headquarters that same day, but Howell never showed up. The following day, the police revealed that a motive had emerged. They publicly announced that they were looking to speak with Brandon Howell. The motive, investigators believed, was robbery. Tabitha had recently received a $40,000 settlement from the car accident she had been involved in when she was 14. However, Tabitha couldn't directly access the money. It was held in a trust fund. With his name now in the public domain, Howell turned himself into the police on August 20th. However, it wasn't in connection to Tabitha and Nick's disappearance. He was arrested on an unrelated charge of underage drinking and held in county jail under a $25,000 bond. While he was in custody, however, Jackson County officials in Missouri also charged Howell with second-degree assault and unlawful use of a weapon. These charges stem from an incident in March of that year, when he had beaten a 17-year-old boy with a baseball bat over an alleged debt of $1,300. After breaking the boy's wrist, Howell had fired a gun at him, fortunately missing his target. These charges carried a separate bond of $100,000. Howell was eventually prosecuted for those crimes, but he avoided prison time because he had committed them while still a juvenile, instead spending time in the state's youth center. While police had Howell in custody, they still didn't have the answers they were looking for in the case of Nick and Tabitha. It wasn't long before Howell found himself in trouble with the law again. Just 1 year later, he was arrested for his involvement in a home invasion in Johnson County. During the incident, Howell and 2 accomplices had forced their way into an apartment armed with a shotgun and a handgun. Once inside, they cut the telephone lines and demanded drugs and money from the 2 occupants. They even cut one of the victims' hands with a butcher knife. The victims eventually managed to escape, but when one of them returned to their ransacked home, she found her pet cat's decapitated head in the backyard and its body hanging from a light fixture. After pleading guilty to a range of charges stemming from the incident, including aggravated robbery, assault, kidnapping, and cruelty to animals, Howell was sentenced to 12 years in prison in September 2000. While incarcerated, Howell was far from a model inmate. According to prison records, he received 20 disciplinary infractions, including fighting, battery, possession of dangerous contraband, and disobeying orders. While Howell was off the streets, progress was being made in the case of Nick Travis and Tabitha Brewer. In 2000, the investigation was handed over to a cold case team, led by Detective Everett Babcock. The team set to work, re-interviewing hundreds of witnesses and pursuing numerous leads that had first surfaced 8 years earlier. It was during this reinvestigation that several new witnesses came forward with shocking information. One person alleged that they had heard Tabitha's voice coming from inside the duplex, followed by the sounds of a man and a woman screaming. Later, the witness saw Howell emerge from the house with blood on his shirt. The witness also claimed that Howell had confessed to murdering Nick and had said that he had taken care of Tabitha. Another person police spoke to was an associate of Howell's. This associate alleged that Howell had mentioned on numerous occasions that he wanted to rob Nick and had tried to enlist the associate's help in his plan. Together, they would rob and kill both Nick and Tabitha, then dismember their bodies in a bathtub, put the remains in suitcases weighted down with rocks, and throw them into the river. Another informant told of a scheme to lure a guy and a girl with a big bank account to a hotel where he planned to hold one of them hostage and force the other to withdraw money from a bank. He then intended to kill them in a bathtub. A woman also came forward, saying that Howell had once threatened her with a shotgun, saying, "I'll do to you like I did Tabby." It seemed that the passage of time had made it easier for people to talk. At the time of Nick and Tabitha's disappearance, these witnesses had been teenagers themselves, perhaps reluctant to get involved and wary of the police. Now older, wiser, and with Howell safely behind bars, they were more forthcoming about what they knew. The cold case team combined these new revelations with the evidence from the initial investigation, presenting a 900-page case file to county prosecutors. Finally, 8 years after Tabitha and Nick disappeared, Brandon Howell was charged with their murders. The trial began in 2009. Prosecutors presented a video presentation linking Howell to the case and called numerous witnesses, including jailhouse informants, to support their claims. Unfortunately, despite the efforts of the police and legal teams, the evidence presented in Tabitha's case was largely circumstantial. Her body had never been found. In his closing arguments, Howell's lawyer told the jurors that his client was an innocent man who had been targeted and pursued by the victims' families since the day they disappeared. He argued that the informants were not motivated by a desire for justice, but by a desire to escape their own legal troubles at Howell's expense. On Monday, March 9, 2009, after 5 hours of jury deliberations, Howell was found not guilty of the murders of Tabitha Brewer and Nick Travis. As the verdict was read in court, several family members left the courtroom sobbing. After the trial, Howell returned to prison to finish serving the remainder of his 12-year sentence for the 1999 home invasion robbery. He managed to stay out of trouble while incarcerated, receiving only one additional disciplinary infraction. Howell was eventually placed on work release and was finally paroled in February 2011. For a while, at least, it seemed that Howell was turning his life around. He got a job working 6 days a week, picking up and delivering donations. But a couple of years later, he wrecked his car and failed to report the accident, resulting in a warrant for his arrest and a brief stint in jail. Aside from that incident, he stayed out of legal trouble and was even released from parole 2 years after leaving prison. His father helped him get a new car and encouraged him to come work at a construction site. But in August 2014, after sustaining an injury and being laid off from his job, Howell committed his most disturbing and violent crime spree yet. On September 2nd, a Tuesday afternoon, the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department's emergency dispatch received a frantic call. The small voice on the other end of the line belonged to 86-year-old Anna Taylor. "Help," she pleaded. "Shotgun." Police raced to the quiet, close-knit cul-de-sac in the Woodbridge neighborhood, where they discovered a harrowing scene. The body of 69-year-old Susan Shugran lay in her driveway, fatally wounded by a shotgun blast. Susan was described as a true activist who cared deeply about humanity and had been happily married to her husband, Charles, for 34 years. Next door, police found Anna Taylor and her 80-year-old husband, George. The elderly couple, who had been married for 47 years, had been severely beaten and were clinging to life in their basement. George and Anna were rushed to the hospital, but their injuries would ultimately prove fatal. Their joint obituary described them as vibrant and young at heart, dedicated to their family and deeply involved in their community. As officers continued their house-to-house search, they found that the horror didn't end there. A few doors down from the Taylors' home, 88-year-old Lorene Hurst and her 63-year-old son, Daryl, lay dead outside, having been shot with a shotgun. Daryl had been married for 40 years and had 2 children and 2 grandchildren. His wife, Kathy Hurst, told KMBC-TV, "They came into this world together, and they left together. Here one minute and gone the next." Police canvassed the neighborhood, trying to piece together the events. Witnesses reported hearing several shotgun blasts coming from the Taylors' home. One neighbor looked out their window and saw what appeared to be the Taylors' Toyota Highlander driving down the street. The person driving the car stopped in front of Susan Shugren's house, got out, and fatally shot her before speeding away, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. A few hours later, police were called to a motel where 3 people had been attacked. 2 of the victims had been followed back to their room by a man who asked them for cigarettes. Once inside, he shot at the door and began his violent assault. The victims managed to escape the room, but the man followed, punching a 3rd victim in the face as she walked by. He continued his attack on one of the initial victims in the parking lot before jumping a fence and fleeing on foot. Eventually, just before midnight, police apprehended the suspect. They had received a complaint about a man acting suspiciously. That man was Brandon Howell. He was gripping his right trouser leg, where he had concealed a 12-gauge shotgun. The gun was loaded with 4 shells, and he had another 2 spent shells in his pocket. Also in his pocket were the keys to George and Anna Taylor's Toyota Highlander. Investigators believe that Howell had entered the Taylors' home with the intention of stealing their classic Jaguar, and had beaten the elderly couple to subdue them. When he was unable to start the Jaguar, he turned his attention to their Toyota instead. Realizing that Susan Shugren, Lorene Hurst, and Daryl Hurst had witnessed the commotion, Howell shot them dead. 5 people murdered in cold blood, seemingly for the sake of a car. The prosecutor's office announced that they would be seeking the death penalty in the quintuple murder case, and an initial trial date was set for September 25, 2017. However, Howell was being represented by a public defender who could only take on a limited number of death penalty cases per year. To avoid violating Howell's constitutional rights, the trial was delayed several times. Finally, the trial began in April 2019, after a 4.5-year wait. It took the jury less than 2 hours of deliberations to find Brandon Howell guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder. Jean Peters Baker, the Jackson County prosecutor, addressed the press outside the courtroom. "You know, I met these families, some of them all those years ago at the other side of the yellow tape, and some the next morning, and some within a week, after the Taylors were removed from life support and succumbed to their injuries. So, it's been a long road with them, and I guess the thought was just how much damage one person could do to so many people. So I'm just really struck by these folks behind the doors here is a sizable group of people with broken hearts, but at least they know justice is there for them." Howell was sentenced the following month, receiving 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In the case of Nick and Tabitha, justice may never be fully served. Tabitha has never been found, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. But despite the uncertainty, one thing is clear: Brandon B. Howell will never be in a position to hurt anyone again. As of May 2025, Tabitha's body has never been found,